Hello, everyone. Yeah. It's great that some of you stayed in here. I have the pleasure, my name is Sara Koślińska, and I have a pleasure to lead this panel today. And we're going to be speaking about an extremely interesting subject, which is how women can succeed in technology and finance, industries that are typically dominated by men. And I would like to ask my panelists to present themselves. Would you like to start?
Sure. So my name is Bogusława, short Bogi, Skowrońska. I'm Polish. I lived a long time in the United States, in the UK, and in Switzerland. So I'll bring a little bit of an international perspective to this discussion. I am an entrepreneur, a VC, and an angel investor. So that's my background.
Hi, I'm Mary Collins Alcantara. I also have an international background. I'm American-Hungarian, living now in Budapest. I'm representing the MKB Fintechlab, running the incubation program there. We are an accelerator program for fintech startups. I come from a more traditional startup background. Been an entrepreneur myself. I had a consulting business, and now focusing on early stage investment side in Budapest. Excited to be here today.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kamila Majcher, I'm Polish, I'm a legal counsel and I work for a governmental agency for NCBR, so I can tell you something about background in how to work in a governmental agency, but as well about my experience in private companies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I worked in technology for the last 8 years, and 2 years ago I started working in fintech, and it was extremely surprising for me that people were treating me differently because because I'm a woman and because of my age. And I wanted to ask you first, and then I will be happy to take comments and questions from the audience if you had similar experience.
Okay, so I have pretty long experience, now working for quite a few years. And I guess I cannot say that I was prejudiced or discriminated, me personally, but I think it's because that when I encounter an environment in which somehow I think the chances are not even, I basically leave and go into a new place where I feel like I can really live my dream. So these are the choices. Sometimes they're difficult. Sometimes I have to change countries. But generally, I think we all know that the discrimination exists. I mean, it's enough to look at some statistics, and we all know it's absolutely clear it exists. There are just different ways of dealing with it. And I guess the point I would like to make is that it's much easier to deal with it when it's outspoken and clear and transparent. And I would like to share with you one experience I had living in Switzerland. When I first got to Switzerland, I came from the US via UK, and I was used to this Anglo-Saxon thinking that, you know, during the interview you cannot ask someone about the age, where they are from. These are just forbidden questions, and how old they are. You just don't do that. And in Switzerland, I was completely shocked when we were discussing in a group who should be promoted, and all of us thought that John, who was from the UK, should be promoted. You know, someone said, but he's British, he cannot be promoted. This is a Swiss bank, and you know, he's British. It's clear that he cannot. You have to be Swiss. I was completely shocked that it was so much in the open. And I'll tell you about the solution. You know, how Switzerland dealt with it many years later to basically stay competitive as a country. But I would like to make a point that it is much easier to deal with the discrimination if people actually acknowledge it. And basically, like the guy from Google who wrote the 4-page memo saying, you know, women are inferior and therefore they are not paid evenly. At least there is a basis for discussion. So that's the point I would like to make. Discrimination can be of different things, not only women, it could be of origins, skin color, background. Different things can be discriminated against.
What about you, Mary?
I think I haven't experienced, I would say something similar. I've thought about this topic a lot, you know, being a woman even in the startup industry in general, there's fewer women. And I think the issue is you get so used to it. You know, I don't think my story would be, I was running a different program, and we had, I think, 20 applicants in our final selection process, and there was 0 female founders, no women even on any of the teams. And it was actually a male colleague of mine who pointed it out that, hey, we should really do something about this. And I felt so ashamed that I didn't even realize. And I think that, to me, is also part of the issue, that we get so used to how things are that it's hard to be reflective and to look around and say, okay, we really should be doing something. Why is this happening? And I think first asking the questions, why? I personally don't necessarily believe that 50% men and women in every single field and every industry is the goal. I think it should be possible. I think there should be more representation of women in leadership positions, for sure, because, like in Sheryl Sandberg's book about Lean In, until there's a pregnant woman who's running the company, you don't think about maternity leave benefits. I mean, why would you? It's kind of like what I was just saying. You tend to get used to how things are in your own little bubble. But I would say, for myself personally, what I've noticed a difference in how women are treated in general, and I think for me this is true. I think the bar is a little bit higher. I felt similar to you, that because I'm, because of my age or my gender, I need to prove myself more in some ways. And I think partly that's because it's unfamiliar. There's studies that show this too. Most VCs are older men, and they invest in what they know, which is older men. So it's harder for a young woman to break into that. But I think, having discussions like this can be really helpful in terms of raising awareness, for sure.
What about you, Kamila?
Okay, in general, I don't feel discriminated, but I think when we...
You come from a legal background.
Yeah, legal background, so we have a lot of females. It is like, there is no problem with that. It is 50-50. But when I realize one thing when we meet the business, and this is like the basic of my work. Sometimes if you meet the guys, so what Mary said, you need to prove more. So they see you, they think, it's gonna be easy, and then after 5 minutes, maybe not, and they're getting smaller speed of like that. So, but you need to prove more, than the guys. That's the way that I see it.
All of you are somehow involved in process of investing into companies, and studies show that companies run by women perform better, and companies run by women that got an investment from a female investor perform even better. So I wanted to ask about your experience with female founders, companies run by women, and how it looks from your perspective, because as Swedish studies performed this year shown, investors tend to see men and women differently. They see young men as young but promising, and young women as young and inexperienced. And when they speak to men, they focus on the opportunities that the business will bring, and speaking to women, they focus on the possible issues and problems that will arise. Could you comment on that?
I don't see enough projects run by women, to be honest. And I think it's a cultural thing. I think women tend to want to be liked and maybe don't have the same aspirations. I'm not sure, but it's not a 50-50 game yet. So I just don't see enough projects. And from, we select maybe 1 out of 10 projects that we clearly evaluate. So we didn't have a chance yet but I think the studies that you mentioned are absolutely clear. I mean, that's how it is.
Before the panel, we had a chance to discuss a friend of yours who is running a fund in another European
in Hungary,
country.
and she told me this fund is called iEurope, and she told me that all the companies in her portfolio run by women, and I think she has 10 investments. So 2 or 3 of the companies, she said they're really performing great. There were also studies done in big corporations when management is of mixed background, co-ed background. These companies tend to do 40% better. This was a McKinsey study. So it's actually good for your performance if you bring a balanced perspective to the product development, to the strategy, to various issues. I mean, it's a proven thing.
Mary, you deal with angel stage investments.
Yeah.
So how it is with your female founders?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think similar. I haven't had the pleasure of working with too many female-founded companies, but I have to mention you. Obviously, I joined after you were in our program, but Sara was one of our stars in our first batch of MKB Fintechlab, and we were really happy to have her. And your company is doing very well. So I can say more from my experience on the consulting side. I have always loved working with women. I love having female clients. I think it's really fun. I really believe in women supporting each other, and I think there's a different sort of this kind of tension of having to prove yourself, and that just is totally gone when you get to work with women. So I can completely understand these studies for sure. We're looking, we hope to have some other female-founded companies in our next batch. But I think, in general, it makes total sense when you have a mixture, a diverse, group of opinions and leadership styles in a company. I think that's only healthy. So I totally agree with all of the research findings.
Would you like to add anything to that?
What I can say that we treat everyone equally, and what is the most important is the idea. It doesn't matter who is running the business, female or male. The idea is the most important, and it depends on the areas in our programs. In some you can find more women than in others, like in life science there are definitely more women. In fintech still this is like an area not really developed, so still this is kind of the male word at this moment.
But it's interesting about fintech being the male world. I came to Poland in the 90s to visit, and I was completely shocked because banks were run by women. Banks were basically, there were only women working in Polish banks in the 90s. And the reason was that it was not a prestigious job because the government made all the decisions and the banks were just conduits to transfer money to the corporates. When it became prestigious, there were very few women, none in the C positions, and basically lots of men. So it can change.
Do you think when it became prestigious, it became more demanding in terms of the workload or more competitive?
No, I think it became more prestigious.
And then that's when the men became interested?
Bigger salaries, it was a better job.
And actually, we were supposed to be 5 of us here. And one of the invited panelists said that unfortunately she cannot join because she doesn't feel qualified enough to share her opinions and experience. And actually speaking to many people who organize tech events, we see a trend that women either don't respond to emails or say that they don't feel comfortable with coming to the stage and presenting their opinions. So this is something that we can work on. I would like to ask women who are here and who are experts in their fields to actually be proactive and join panels and discussions whenever they have a possibility to do so. Do you also see it as important?
Raise your hand.
I think it's very important to see women on stage. And I would like to, we have 10 more minutes. Are there any questions? Okay, then we have 10 more minutes.
I would like to share maybe this experience I had in Switzerland when first in the 90s, it was kind of known that you cannot be promoted in a big international bank unless you're Swiss. And then all of a sudden, things changed because the country discussed, so the top in the country discussed, and basically decided that Switzerland has to attract international talent, otherwise they're not going to succeed in the global world. So 10 years later, the government basically made a very conscious effort to communicate to all the corporates and impose in a certain way rules that, you cannot discriminate just because someone is Swiss, then they have a managing position. We have to bring international people and give them very top positions. And because they were able to communicate to the country and people understood that this is the way to succeed, the change happened. So one way that this inequality that persists between men and women, I think could come from the top government. Can you imagine the President of the United States, maybe not this one, but generally, saying, okay, we have to make the big difference. Let's make 2008, let's really figure out how we can equalize the differences that exist in pay, in promotion, that we have a more balanced view. I think this is really the way to do it.
And would you like also to share some success stories of women in finance and tech that you see are, getting exposure and awards and so on and so forth? For example, when it comes to fintech, there is this Polish girl, Marta Krupińska, who is running Azimo, a very successful company in the UK. And I think there are more cases like this in your surroundings.
Mary Meakin, on an international scale, right? She's, I think, from big institutions, big banks. So there are definitely very successful women who have made it. So it's possible. There are just few of us.
The founder of Starling Bank is also a woman, and her, I think it's the COO, is a woman. We had her, Megan Kaywood, speak at our FinTech Academy a few weeks ago. Very inspiring. And I think about them all the time when I think about women in FinTech as people that we hope to aspire to be.
Yes, there is a question. And there should be a microphone here.
I can speak loudly. It's okay. I don't think, all of the stuff I've tried before, and of course I agree with you, I'm a woman as well, so I also think that we add value to organizations, it's a different point of view. I honestly think women are a bit more organized than men, also in the way they think about certain things. But what needs to be done? All the stories that you're presenting, it's all very nice, but what do you think from your perspective needs to change?
If I may. So what I've noticed is that men usually don't realize that they are looking at us differently because we're women. So I get a lot of, when I enter a room with my co-founder, who is a man in his 50s, people automatically assume that he is the CEO of the company, and they speak to him. And I also got questions like, are you an assistant, and so on. So I think that it's helpful to just tell a man, but not in a way that will make them uncomfortable, that they might be treating you differently because you're a woman or because you're young. There are ways to do it. For example, Marta, I mentioned before, when she was dealing with investors during one of her fundraising rounds, she started with, I'm so happy that you're different than the other investors because you want to speak to me, you believe in me, and so on and so forth. So I think that this is one of the ways to make men start thinking about that maybe they are biased unconsciously.
Well, I think as mothers, we have to raise our daughters already in a different cultural mindset. If we want a change to happen, basically we have to create a certain mindset that I can do anything I want. I can fly to the moon if I want. That kind of attitude. I think that's very important, so that the change come also. There's many more women trying to really be, successful leaders, because the culture is keeping us back quite often. And the second aspect is transparency in our environment. So actually, this not equal pay, these things can disappear as soon as possible.
I think our sons also. I think for me, I sympathize with what you're saying because, and what I always try to say, one of the messages that I like to bring up, at least when I'm part of these, because I think we do tend to say a lot of the same things and we know the studies and what practically speaking needs to be done. And for me, I really think, a big connection is the work-life balance, especially for families, because there is a physical aspect of giving birth and being a mother that women have to deal with that men don't. And I think for me, what's always missing from these conversations, we talk a lot about women in the workplace and how we can achieve more outcomes there, but it's mostly women that we're speaking to. It's great to see there actually are quite a few men here, but I think the other half of that is men at home. And I think even if even for single women or single men or people who don't have families, I think this is still a really hidden part of the dialogue that to me is really important. That, you know, for example, I wouldn't be able to be here today if my husband wasn't taking time off from his career, taking care of our 6-month-old daughter so that I could focus on what I'm doing. And I think there's a lot of men out there who are these quiet, unsung heroes, but it's not sexy maybe to be a stay-at-home dad. But I think the more men that we can get to do that and put themselves in the position of women who tend to opt out or not put themselves in high-pressure types of careers for these reasons, I think that's going to be a source of the change. I don't know if people agree. I mean, I'd be happy to have a dialogue with that afterwards, but that's my, you know, I would love to have men speaking on a panel about how they're staying at home so that their wives or their sisters or their women colleagues can get ahead. I think that's what we need as a next step.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great point.
Did you have another question?
Since we have 5 more minutes and no one else is asking questions. Okay, this is maybe a different angle, because I agree, the fact there's no man on this panel talking about how he feels, you know, how he portrays women would be such an interesting thing to know, to think about how they see us. I talk about it with my boyfriend a lot, and his main critique point on this is that females are either trying to be too hard and prove themselves in a way that's just unnatural or not authentic, or they're too shy. And in a corporate environment where, you know, if you don't promote yourself in a certain way, no one will. Those are the two main types of personalities he encounters at his bank. He works for JP Morgan, and this is his main critique. So maybe the controversial question is, maybe we're doing something wrong, or what is it that we're doing wrong? Because all the women that I speak with in this are great. They're smart when they talk to me, and then I sit at conferences and they just sit there and take notes.
I have somewhat of a response to this. I think, first of all, it comes back to this, you know, what you were saying about implicit and assumptions, right? I mean, the fact that women can be too shy or too assertive, those are the options. You know, men are, I think, almost never evaluated on such binary terms. But I think what can help are at the, you know, systemic level, changing the way certain structures or processes are done. Like, there's an example, I think Google has done this. Instead of asking people, you know, to sign up for a promotion, having them nominate each other, or there's different strategies to have women nominate other women, because it's kind of a cultural thing. Women are shy about putting their own names in the hat. So you need to change how your company is doing things. How does the promotion process work to incentivize women to do it in a way that's accessible for women to participate. But I think it's really challenging, and it's this sort of thing. How do you strike that balance where you're staying authentic, you're playing the boys' game, but then also changing the system from the inside? I mean, it's going to take a long time before we really have parity on these sorts of things. But I think from my side, what I think is really encouraging is, once we're aware of it and we've seen tactics that other companies are doing that can help, trying to incorporate those into our organizations as much as we can.
And I guess in startups, it's somehow easier maybe because we can be our named CEOs. We name ourselves, right? We have the passion, we have the drive, and we do it. So we can create a culture of our own. So maybe this is an era in which more women will lead, maybe.
But maybe this is also a personality type, right? Maybe there are plenty of women who would be great CEOs, but it takes that sort of belief in yourself or drive or whatever it is to put yourself out there. And we need to create that, cultivate that kind of mentality.
Change
a little
the
bit
culture.
more.
We have one more question.
Actually, if I may comment from the men's side, I think
Good.
I think the men has to change their attitude and also their mentality in the way how they track and approach the woman in terms of business. And there is also kind of exceptional story of Credit Info, which is an Icelandic credit bureau, who actually nominated their chief marketing officer being 6 months pregnant, and they nominated her into her position. And I think this is also a great story how the men has thought that the CEO and the owner of the Icelandic or the overall credit info group, how they behaved and how they changed their perception and how they treat women, let's say, equally, no matter what actually the conditions are. So I think the ball is on our side.
And pregnancy is not seen as a handicap, but
Exactly.
it's actually a positive. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just comment from my side as a man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think that we are running out of time. So thank you for participating, for asking questions, and thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you for leading.
Thank you very much.